𝗂𝗲𝗀 and welcome to this program. I'm 𝗫𝗀𝗀. The People's Climate Vote 2024 by UNDP and the University of Oxford is the world's largest standalone public opinion survey on climate change. The survey was conducted in over 77 countries, representing 87% of the world's population. The survey gives an understanding of how people are experiencing climate change and what they want their leaders to do about it. Further, it amplifies the voices of people regarding climate change. To discuss more on this, I'm joined by Mohammad Yunus, resident representative of UNDP Bhutan. Thank you for your time. So to begin with our discussion, can you give us an overview of the People's Climate Vote 2024 survey?
Thanks, 𝗫𝗀𝗀. First of all, thank you for having me here, and thanks for this opportunity to talk about this very important topic. Let me just take a step back and just say a little bit set the context which this survey is coming. As we all know, the world is heading towards a scenario that we all have to work together to prevent, and that is going the rising temperature. As the UN Secretary General put it, it is a climate crisis. Some of the recent studies basically shows that the Earth atmosphere, it can maximum handle probably 200 billion tons of carbon emissions. With the rate the emissions are happening right now, we're about 40 billion tons are released into atmosphere. So the total climate budget of 200 billion is going to be busted in about 5 years. So this is the situation we are in altogether. We only have one planet. What does it require is a collective effort from around the world to raise the ambitions, but also take steps. And this is the context where the survey is coming in. So as you rightly mentioned, it's the largest survey, 77 countries. But what is also important is the timing of the survey. And I would like to highlight a couple of points there. Number one, the survey is coming as the countries are preparing for the NDC 3, their nationally determined contributions that they will be submitting. Secondly, this is also a year, as we call them, the super elections. So about 3.5 billion population are going to be going to elections. And that is most or many of these are the first time people who vote for the first time. So the survey actually gives us a perspective of these people, of the voters, those who will be going and voting for their leaders and selecting their leaders. So that is also why it's quite an important time for this survey. So what the survey basically tells us in a nutshell, people expect more action. And translating these promises into action. So 80% of those who surveyed in 77 countries want more action. About 86% of those who surveyed, they want more global cooperation, and they expect their leaders to go beyond geopolitics. And work on a climate agenda together, regardless of whatever geopolitics might be there. About 78% of those who surveyed, they actually they ask for more protection for those who are at risk of the climate change. And 56% of those, they are seriously worried of where this planet is heading, and seriously worried of lack of actions that is taking place. So that is the context of where this survey is coming. If you compare, there was a similar survey in 2021 that covered only 50 countries. But this survey also reached out to more youth and more questions regarding to mental health, for example, the issues that youth are facing, as well. So in that sense, a bit more comprehensive.
You have already highlighted the key findings of the survey, and the survey is also complete, and I believe this is the second edition of this survey. So who is the targeted audience for this report?
2025 is also the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement. Countries will be submitting their nationally determined contributions 3, which is their commitments. 3.7 billion people are expected to elect their leaders going through elections. So the audience of the survey is basically policymakers, those who are making policies, those who can make a difference, those who are responsible to implement those policies, those who have to raise the ambitions. And this is where the voice of the people, so half of the planet will be going, or half of the global population will be electing new leaders. So it's important for them also to hear what people say. So the audience is basically bringing the voice of the people to those who make policies and to those who are responsible for implementation of those policies. Our hope is that this voice will be heard, and it will lead to positive actions, and particularly looking at what people say, like across the world, cooperate on this agenda beyond the geopolitics and so on. So that is what the survey hopefully will do. So in a sense, I would say that the audience of the survey results is actually those who make policies, those who are responsible for those policies, those who make decision where the financing should go, those who make decision where the spending should be done around the world. Our hope is that they will listen to the voice of people.
Now, you have said that the targeted audience are the policy makers. So how is UNDP putting in efforts to reach them, to reach this report to them?
Well, as I'm speaking today with you, so all over the world, UNDP together with our sister UN agencies are making efforts. So we are supporting countries in their efforts to prepare and submit their NDC3, as we call it, or nationally determined contribution. So there is a strong advocacy. UNDP Administrator Achim Steiner has been heavily engaged in this. The whole UN is mobilized. So I think through the advocacy, but also through our technical support to these countries, we hope that that will help to advance. Because if you look at the world has a choice to make. We still have, it's still possible with ambition actions, not only promises, but actions, to limit to 1.5 degree, in the next 5 years, because otherwise it will go, much higher, and that is the scenario that we are trying to avoid. So UNDP, together with the rest of the UN, is engaged in all these countries where we are present to advocate, raise awareness, provide technical support, provide alternative policy suggestions, recommendations. So the entire UN is mobilized in this case. So I don't think there will be anyone who is a policymaker in a country or a government that they will not be reached one way or another.
Going into the report, out of the 15 questions that were asked while conducting this survey, one question was, how well is your country addressing climate change? And to that, people responded that more efforts are needed to address climate change globally. So what do you think about the current situation? And even in Bhutan, are we doing enough to combat climate change?
I mean, if you look at People's Voice, Bhutan had the highest percentage, if you look at the global average, where people expected more actions. So that is the People's Views and Voice. On the other hand, I personally see Bhutan as a role model for the rest of the world to follow. Bhutan has policies that are implemented. So conservation, it's in Bhutan DNA. It is part of the Bhutan development philosophy of the gross national happiness, protecting the environment, protecting biodiversity, So Bhutan has taken steps. Bhutan has developed, with support that we have provided, also low carbon emission development strategies. So in my view, what Bhutan is doing can be a role model for many countries. That doesn't mean that more is not needed. I think Bhutan is, from what I understand from the conversation that I had, is committed not only to remain carbon neutral, but also to remain carbon negative. For example, today I was discussing in one of this event the 10 million trees that Bhutan is planning to plant. That is a very positive step there. Bhutan is protecting. It is 60% are protected by law, the forest. Well, the actual coverage is about 71%. So these are, I think, some of the facts that places Bhutan in a very special place to have a much stronger voice globally as well. But Bhutan has a lot to share with the rest of the world on the success stories of Bhutan. And from UNDP side, that's exactly where we will support Bhutan also to have a much stronger voice globally.
Talking about the impacts of climate change, now when we say impacts of climate change, everybody living across the globe will be feeling the impacts of climate change, because the impacts of climate change won't leave rich countries or poor countries, spare poor countries. It should be felt, but it may depend on the geographical location about the impacts, how they feel it. But so based on that, one of the questions in the survey was, should rich countries help poor countries combat climate change? So can you say something about this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, climate change is a shared agenda, whether a country is rich or poor. No country will be spared from the impact of climate change. Why is that? Because we all live on one planet, and then we are part of this global ecosystem. So there is no difference between a rich country and a poor country. The only difference that perhaps is making the rich countries can probably afford to have certain mitigation strategies and implemented. But overall, no one, as you said, can be spared. So yes, indeed, I think, and this was Bhutan survey had the same voice as the rest of the world, that the more developed economies, they will have to step up their efforts, their commitment, their ambitions in terms of the financial support, but also transfer of technology, access to new technology. So that is, that is something which I think that voice not only came from Bhutan or developing countries, that voice also came from developed countries. So those people who will be going and electing their leaders in the elections in the developed countries had the same view, that the developed economies have to help the developing countries because they have the resources. Now, I think there's one question which usually comes, and that is, the climate change, in terms of the resources that's needed, a lot of resources. Let me share with you a couple of statistics, right? Now, if you look at the G20 countries, right? The total economy of GDP of G20 countries is about $90 trillion. Some of these G20 countries are also a member of NATO. So they have committed that they will be spending 2% on their military as part of their commitment to NATO. Now, imagine if the G20 commit 2% to tackle the climate change. That will give about 1.7 trillion dollars per year. And if you put that into how many Bhutan economy will fit into that, you do the calculation. So the resources are there, the technology is there, the money is there. It is about the political will that people will have to get their priorities right. And if you look at, for example, just forget about G20 for a minute. Just NATO countries, their GDP is about $48 trillion. So if they commit just 1%, they are committing 2% of GDP to NATO expenditure. If they commit just 1% to climate change, that is equivalent to $480 billion a year, right? So that is. Now, when I mentioned earlier, they have to get their priorities right. So the commitment of 2% to NATO in military is doable, but commitment of 1% for the climate change is not doable. I mean, there is something wrong there, for example. Now, if you look on the other hand, in 2022, the subsidies that was given to the fossil fuel industry, $7 trillion. Just the subsidies for the fossil fuel. Imagine if you give similar subsidies to renewable energy, to green technology. Imagine the amount of resources that will be available. So the fossil fuel is heavily subsidized. So that is when I say they have to get their priorities right. Now, the $7 trillion subsidies of 2022, if you translate this, you can fit in that $7 trillion 2,800 Bhutan's economy. Bhutan's GDP roughly about 2.5 billion. So 2,800 Bhutan's economies are going to fit into that 1 year subsidies of the fossil fuel. So I think people's voice should be heard, that these countries can and should and must support the developing economy, because at the end of the day, it's shared planet, shared atmosphere, and shared prosperity. And the future generations, is shared by whether you are a developing country or a developed country, poor country or rich country. So that is, that's my view. That I hope that voice will be heard as well.
UNDP has always considered addressing climate change a priority, and even from the 17 SDGs, the 13th one says climate action, that the world needs to take urgent action to combat climate change for a better future. Can you tell us what are some of the current initiatives of UNDP to address climate change?
I mean, first of all, globally, UNDP is a strong advocate. As I mentioned earlier, UNDP puts about close to roughly $5 billion a year into development assistance provided throughout the world. So a sizable amount of that $5 billion is actually supporting countries to address the climate change, either in terms of supporting their adaptation efforts or supporting their mitigation efforts. So it is a core areas of UNDP support. Now, if we look at, for example, in Bhutan, so our previous programming cycle of 5 years plus this year's, you're talking about roughly about $82 million of resources that UNDP mobilized and brought to Bhutan. A major part of that is related to the climate change support in terms of building resilience at the community level, building resilience at policy level, what policies. So if I look, for example, at a few statistics there, we're reaching about 170 or 180,000 farming households to support them in terms of climate resilience practice. About 480 kilometer long different irrigation systems which are climate resilience. Now, when I say we did that, I have to be very clear. Our role is here support. That credit goes to the government, the Royal Government of Bhutan, for their efforts. We support, we provide technical support, we can mobilize resources, but the credit goes to those who actually implement this, and different ministries, various ministries, in the commitments of the Royal Government of Bhutan that is what deserves the credit. Our role is facilitation. We will facilitate. Going forward, climate change will be a key focus of UNDP. We just this year launched our new programming cycle for 5 years. And if you look at that 5-year program document, a major focus of that is on climate change, either through governance, through local initiatives, through bringing resources. One of the key initiatives that we hope to roll out is, for example, the urban resilience project, which our hope is to start later this year, is about $20 million, and that is how to support Bhutan in terms of urban resilience, because with the urbanization, it brings its own challenges. How you can make that urbanization that's resilience against in terms of the circular economy, in terms of the water, scarcity of water. So we will continue to focus our efforts in terms of support to Bhutan.
Now, to address climate change, people should be aware about what is climate change and its impact. So how is UNDP ensuring that all Bhutanese from all the communities across the country understand and are aware about climate change?
As I mentioned earlier, so our role is support to the government of Bhutan, support to different institutions, but we also work with the communities. So in terms of the awareness, all our projects that are in different parts of Bhutan, they do work with the community. They do raise awareness at the central level, at the district level, also working with the different institutions of the royal government of Bhutan. We are focusing on communication. We are focusing on advocacy, on raising awareness. And the Bhutanese people, if you look also on the survey, I think they have the highest level of awareness when it comes to. But one area which came very from this climate, the survey was a larger number of Bhutanese and also globally. They actually advocated for having climate change integrated into the curriculum, integration into the education system, and I think that is something which is not only doable but necessary, and whatever support we could provide, the rest of the UN as well, whether that's with UNICEF or that's with UNESCO, with other entities, we will definitely work with them and try to provide a coherent support to Bhutan if the government wants to take that step forward.
Now, whenever we talk about climate change, there are chances that people might think, an individual might think, I don't care about climate change because the policymakers and it's being dealt at a higher level, so they don't care. But according to the People's Climate Vote Report 2024 also, globally over half of the people, they said that they think about climate crisis either daily or weekly. So would you like to tell us why should particularly an individual care about climate change?
Unfortunately, climate change will not spare anyone.
Mm-hmm.
So let me give you an example here in Bhutan. If the rain patterns changes, farmers who need rain at the right time to cultivate rice, they will be affected. Now, that poor farmer probably didn't add, to the climate crisis through, emissions but it will be affected. If you look at the glacier, melting of the glaciers will affect people. A sudden melting of the glacier can cause flash floods, reduction of water for agriculture. So I think each one of us, whether we are in Bhutan or we are in California or we are in Australia, wherever we are, we have to play our role, each one of us. And I think
keeping that in mind, how can an individual contribute to addressing climate change in their own small ways?
Yeah, we have a voice. I think we need to hold our policymakers and those who are responsible for implementing those policies accountable. We, the citizens of the world, we have a voice, we have a choice. As I mentioned, the 3.7 billion people that will be electing new leaders this year, they have a voice. That has to be heard. Youth have a voice. That have to be heard. On an individual level, for example, it's very easy to replace our lights with LEDs. That consumes less energy. When we are building our buildings, can we make it more energy efficient, for example? So all of us, we have to play a role. But at the larger scale, I think all the citizens, we have to use our voice, and that voice has to be heard. Now, let me just also, when I talk about voices, not only the politicians, but our voice also has to be heard by those who invest, the private sector, the big companies, whether it's oil companies, other. More awareness about the climate change, about the emissions, will force them. Because the moment people say, okay, I want to buy a fridge, but I want this fridge to have a label, what was the carbon print of this fridge? That is where a major change will happen. We are all consumers. So the behavior of consumers will also drive, where people invest. So we all have a role, big or small, and I think we can make a difference through our voice, through our actions.
Mm-hmm. As we're running out of time, would you like to make any comments?
Well, I would like just to highlight one part, and that is the Bhutan's voice globally. Bhutan has a very unique voice. Bhutan has to share a lot with the rest of the world. As I mentioned earlier, Bhutan, through the vision of His Majesty's and the DNA of Bhutan, has so much that is actually aligned with the climate change, the planetary agenda, as if I may. In that voice, in that experience, has to be shared globally. And this is one of the areas where, under the leadership of 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗏, that we will support, and that is to bring a coalition of countries that share the same situation as Bhutan in terms they are either carbon neutral or carbon negative, to build that alliance across the continents. In that, when the leaders go to the Summit of the Future in New York, they will have to have a unified position and voice. When they go to COP, they will have to. When they go next year to Brazil, or they go to Baku, or they go to Riyadh, or they go to Cali for different parts of either COP 16 or 29 or 30, they will need to have a unified position. And that is where I admire 𝗨𝗏𝗃𝗏's vision and 𝗨𝗏𝗃's leadership on that, bringing these countries together. So that is something that we will definitely support.
With this, I'd like to thank you for taking your time and enlightening us on climate change and People's Climate Vote Report 2024. We really hope this report plays a big role in addressing climate change globally. Okay.
Thank you so much. We hope so too. And I'm pretty sure that it will be heard. But thank you so much for this opportunity, because this is one part that we play together to get this voice of the people out. But thank you so much.
And to all the viewers, thank you for watching.